Get on board the Bernier bus train. Come get on board the Bernier bus train. Once you hear that clickety-clack, there ain't no time for turning back. Go get on board the Bernier bus train.
Welcome to another episode of the Bernier Bust Show. Today's episode begins with some yesterday's news. We had the story about trashing Tulsi. Former DNC official attacks Bernie Sanders for defending Tulsi. I despise that a-hole. So here's some pushback from the corporate media on Bernie Sanders. We made the case yesterday that Bernie is the next one in line. If they're attacking Tulsi now for being anti-war, Bernie's the obvious next in line. I think it's a warm-up. I think that they're warming up on Tulsi, trying to figure out how to make things stick with her. And if they succeed there, then they're going to come after Bernie next. Many of Bernie's backers have long believed the Democratic National Committee didn't give them a fair shake in 2016. That's putting it mildly. Many of the senator's supporters still have trouble thinking the DNC won't tip the scales against him in 2020. Their skepticism is likely to increase following some strong anti-Sanders comments from a former top DNC official. In a pair of tweets late Monday, Adam Park-Omenko, who served as the field director for the DNC ahead of the 2016 election, attacked Sanders for defending Tulsi Gabbard. Bernie joins Trump and thousands of Russian bots in defending the person who blamed the U.S. instead of Assad for gassing his own people, not to mention his not-so-stellar voting record on Russian sanctions, Park-Omenko wrote. He added, "Fuck Bernie. I'd forgotten how much I despise that asshole. Thanks for the reminder." So that's where the DNC is. Pretty blatant, unadulterated look. If you want some idea about how the media manufactures consent, look no farther than Noam Chomsky. Noam Chomsky is onto this guy in the DNC. He understands how things work. Take a quick peek at this video with me.
In 1988, Noam Chomsky co-authored a book with Edward Herman called Manufacturing Consent. It blasted apart the notion that media acts as a check on political power, that media inform the public, serve the public, so that we can better engage in the political process.
Right.
In fact, media manufacture our consent. They tell us what those in power need them to tell us so we can fall in line. Democracy is staged with the help of media that work as propaganda machines. Media operate through 5 filters. The first has to do with ownership. Mass media firms are big corporations. Often they're part of even bigger conglomerates. Their endgame, profit. And so it's in their interests to push for whatever guarantees that profit. Critical journalism takes second place to the needs and interests of the corporation. The second filter exposes the real role of advertising. Media costs a lot more than consumers will ever pay. So who fills the gap? Advertisers. And what are the advertisers paying for? Audiences. And so it isn't so much that the media are selling you a product, their output. They're also selling advertisers a product. You. How does the establishment manage the media? That's the third filter. Journalism cannot be a check on power because the very system encourages complicity. Governments, corporations, big institutions know how to play the media game. They know how to influence the news narrative. They feed media scoops.
And if you don't believe that part, remember my article featured on Medium that reveals all the connections in Hollywood with the talent agencies and the DNC and the CIA, and these connections are easy to document. They're right out in plain sight. They feed media scoops, official accounts, interviews with the experts. All these controlling tentacles. It isn't even that difficult to figure this out if we just pay attention and open our eyes.
Accounts, interviews with the experts. They make themselves crucial to the process of journalism. So those in power and those who report on them are in bed with each other. If you want to challenge power, you'll be pushed to the margins. Your name won't be down. You won't be getting in. You've lost your access. You've lost the story. When the media, journalists, whistleblowers, sources, stray away from the consensus, they get flack. That's the fourth filter. When the story is inconvenient for the powers that be, you'll see the flack machine in action, discrediting sources, trashing stories.
And this happens with algorithms. If you look at Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, they demonetize, they ratchet down the supporters, you lose subscribers. There are lots of algorithms in place that just do this automatically, this big stick whacking down on you. Bernie or bust is where we're going with this. Bernie or bust is an inconvenient story. This guy getting whacked, if he had Bernie or bust written on him, that would be sufficient reason to treat him to the flack that they're talking about here.
And diverting the conversation.
Diverting the conversation is very powerful. So you saw Donald Trump wig there diverting us. He's waving shiny objects in our faces. Impeachment is an object like that. It distracts us from what's really going on in the world.
To manufacture consent, you need an enemy, a target. That common enemy is the fifth filter. Communism, terrorists, immigrants, a common enemy, a boogeyman.
Russia.
And to fear helps corral public opinion. 5 filters, one big media theory. Consent is being manufactured all around you, all the time.
I love the boots. All right, so Bernie or bust is an example of a story that probably never should have gotten out. Bernie or bust is a warning. Ignore it and Trump wins. So picture Victor Tiffany with the big stick whacking him, not getting a place at the table, not getting access. That's pretty much how it goes for Victor. But yet he just got a story. An opinion piece was published yesterday in Newsweek. And if you want to understand how the general population has given their consent, the manufactured consent, you just have to go down here. After Victor lays out all the points, you just go down to the comment section and you'll see this battle. And it's interesting because it doesn't look like a battle of corporations against the people. The people are fighting each other on behalf of corporations. You just look at some of these. You can see, okay, green raindrop here is probably a human being, not a corporation, not a shill for a corporation. And the comments, 5 new comments, the comments here are blowing up, which is wonderful because it's probably the last thing corporations want. If the DNC nominates anyone but Sanders, please consider abandoning the corrupt Democrat Party by voting for every single leftist third-party independent candidate on the ballot in the general election. That really bothers the establishment, blue dog, suburban, supremacist Democrats. Please show up and help build another party that truly represents the people. The only problem I see with that is that eventually the corporations will own that party too. So it's sort of like when Cenk Uyghur got established, he came in as an outsider, and then he started taking money in the tune of $20 million from the Clinton machine. So the parties would be like that too. They'd start out innocently enough, and then the corporations would take them over. The only way to really fix all this is to take power away, take money away, take influence away from the few assholes at the top of the pile who wield it against everyone else. You see, Brooklyn Girl. Just go down all these comments. I'm not going to read them all to you. But what you notice, Fox Free, I think Fox Free is a paid shill because all of Fox Free's comments are allowed to be put on here. For my comments, it's like 1 out of 15 comments is allowed to stay. I'll show you one of mine. This is Blue Mustache. How much did Fox Free pay Newsweek for the privilege of having his comments show up? All of mine get deleted or not allowed to show up in the first place. Perhaps he paid nothing. Perhaps Newsweek has the same motivation for censoring comments it disagrees with as do Twitter and Facebook. Bernie or bust typically frightens Wall Street-funded think tanks and corporate news outlets. I must say that it surprises me that they allow this article even to get published. Bravo, Victor Tiffany and the Bernie or bust movement. It's time the comfortable suburbanites began to care about working class people. I would have said give a shit about working class people, but they censor my comments if I swear. And then you've got this guy. Jacobin has an article by Matt Karp, and Matt Karp is talking about what the media don't want us to know. And he's talking about, just listen to him for a second.
De-alignment or a misalignment.
Right. Well, and you track that decline of sort of class-aligned voting in the piece, and you start with a thought experiment of if you can...
In the piece, she's referring to this piece. Is this the future liberals want? Jacobin by Matt Karp. And here's the thought experiment.
Continue down this path of the Democratic Party basically being a party of professionals with enough signaling and anti-racism to keep working class minorities in line, where that ultimately ends up. Can you just...
That was beautiful, the way she summarized it. She's saying the DNC doesn't represent working class people anymore. It's elitist people who signal like they're for gay marriage or they're for women's freedom of choice with their own body. They'll signal like that, but they're still supremacists. They're still elitists. They still don't care about working class people. And so Matt takes that to an interesting, he forecasts into the future what the political landscape will be. He makes Malia Obama a presidential candidate. It's really interesting. He only does a few paragraphs, but it really blows your mind if you're thinking about what the world could look like if we continue down the path that he describes here.
Just lay that out for us a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of a nightmare scenario, but I do think it's worth thinking about this election, not just in terms of, okay, what will X or Y candidate do in the first 100 days in office? That's important, and we should debate that. But we also need to think about what are the longer, or even medium-term implications of the political coalitions that are being formed, right? And I think what we saw in 2016 was a Democratic Party that was more than ever committed to a kind of ethic of professionalism and, sort of sober, sort of sanity against a sort of, as the Democrats would have portrayed it, a kind of deranged right-wing populism, racist populism led by Trump. And I feel like that alignment has gotten us nowhere, and I worry that if it continues, if it intensifies for the next 10 years, 20 years, you're going to have even more nightmarish versions of this kind of, frankly, I don't want to call it fascist, but I don't think that's the right term, but frankly, a kind of totally deranged right-wing government or right-wing rule that's reliant, but that can yet claim the mantle to speak for some kind of silent majority and of the working class. Donald Trump is now putting out hats, right, that say American worker. And whereas you'd have a Democratic Party that is ever more retreats into a sort of a citadel of educated and dedicated professionals with the right values that maybe can pull, as you said, a large group of non-white workers who are unenthusiastically but kind of captively have to vote for this party because they're not part of Trump's majority. And
that's perfect. So you look at that, you look at the unwilling captives, the non-white, the non-suburban, the non-supremacist captives. That's Elizabeth Warren. He's describing Elizabeth Warren to a T. They're these dedicated professionals with the right values, but they still don't give a shit about working people. And so the working people know this, and then in this election, they're going to go with somebody who portrays himself as a populist, is Donald Trump. If you have Donald Trump against Elizabeth Warren, you've got these reluctant people who know that the Democrats don't give a shit about them. They'll either stay home or they'll vote for Donald Trump. But if you put Bernie Sanders in, a true populist, he has the extra constituents that the white liberals don't have. And so he can bring enough people to the table who would have voted for Trump or who would have stayed home to win the day. And so please watch this video from the Hill, but also read this thought experiment that Crystal was describing. It's fascinating. I got into a big battle on Facebook. I was going to show you some of it, but it's not really as pertinent. So let me just read to you what starts. Well, I'll read you. I won't read you what started the argument. I'll just read you the conclusion. All the privileged suburban supremacists who vote Democrat are going to keep coming up short for the foreseeable future. Corporate centrism is yesterday's news. Working class people are not buying it any longer. Populism is today's news. There are no longer enough vote blue elitists to win an election. The day of reckoning is at hand. If you're my friend on Facebook, feel free to join in with any of the fracas I start on there. Now, Max Blumenthal, I've been showing you pieces of this. This is a 22 minute video, but it's all brilliant. I just keep thinking, how can I show you this whole thing? And I can't. It's because of the time constraints. But watch this on your own. Here's another snippet to try to lure you into watching. This guy is wonky for sure. Max and Aaron is less wonky, but still, they're both so brilliant. They're so smart and so well informed. It's almost painful. What Max knows about Syria, what Max knows about northern Syria, what Max knows about all the different factions there, and how Samantha Powers has... I didn't even know who she was, and you may not either. But if you watch this video, you'll know a lot more about manufactured consent that Noam Chomsky is talking about. Let's just watch enough of this to see what the gist of it.
Be alive. So it's because of Samantha Power and people like her that we're facing this moment, and only Tulsi Gabbard has the guts to stand up and say that, and that's why she's being attacked. So it's kind of like we're witnessing a cover-up by smearing Tulsi Gabbard and trying to get her to shut up.
And that's what they want from Bernie supporters too. And they said earlier in this same clip that Tulsi is just a warm-up for Bernie.
And, you know, Max, to take it to what you point out in your book, The Management of Savagery, which I think is essential reading to understand what happened not just to countries targeted by U.S. regime change like Syria and Libya, but also to understand what happened to the U.S. Because, as you point out, it's also these wars that people like Samantha Power and Hillary Clinton and Ben Rhodes have fueled that helped gave us Donald Trump, creating these mass refugee flights, which then xenophobes like Trump have exploited to appeal to the racism of white people in the U.S., a dynamic not just here, but also found in Britain and across Europe.
Right.
And also exploiting the fact that these wars cost money at home and cost lives at home. And Trump painted himself as being the antithesis of people like Samantha Power and Hillary Clinton, and was able to dupe people into believing that he was anti-war, which helped him actually win these states. So the irony, taking it back to Samantha Power's tweets, of instead of acknowledging the role of her own regime change wars and policies in Trump's victory, she then blames that on third-party candidates like Tulsi Gabbard, and says that that will end up empowering these official enemies who policies like hers target and try to destabilize. So the convergence of cynicism here and the convergence of irony and hypocrisy is just very staggering.
Staggering. And that's in starting with Noam Chomsky today to see how it works, and then seeing Samantha Power and how she works and how the Clinton machine works, that it all comes clear. I really hope, I mean, it takes time to watch these clips. It takes time to really understand the issues. But if we don't, we're just these boot-buying, wide-eyed consumers who just gobble up all of the garbage that the corporate machine is feeding us. And so the antidote is watching these guys. The antidote is watching the Bernie or Buzz show. The antidote is reading the articles that in the information section under these videos. I have lots of things that you can watch and read to help open your mind, open your eyes to see how you're being manipulated. That's probably the biggest story of the Bernie or Buzz show, is just how we're all being manipulated into doing what our corporate masters want. And I just hope that there's got to be some way for us to figure out how to find out the truth around their blockade. So keep sharing. On yesterday's show, I showed how Facebook and YouTube, they won't notify people in either place of new episodes of the Bernie or Buzz show. So you're going to have to just keep coming back here every day on your own, because you're not going to get any help. They don't like, the algorithm people don't like what I'm saying, and they don't like what the people I feature are saying. It's kind of discouraging, but keep on burning, and hope to see you tomorrow.
Get on board the Bernie or Buzz train. Come get on board the Bernie or Buzz train. Once you hear that clickety-clack, there ain't no time for turning back. Go get on board